I am a problem solver. My philosophy is, how hard can it be? I can figure that out. If a family doesn't have a solid foundation, it is very difficult for them to then be able to go and make those higher level decisions. We have an opportunity to do really amazing work and help them do the amazing work that they want to do.
Hello and welcome to the Success Differently podcast. My name is Michelle Sorgaroli and I'm your host today. And I'm being joined by Christi Van Rite. Now, Christi started her career in traditional financial planning. And about 10 years later in 2018, Christi took an unorthodox and unexpected leap into family office services on the administrative side. And she founded White River Consulting, which is where we find her today. The interesting thing I find about Christi's story is how she grew her business, with her focus primarily on not sharing client success stories, which is a more traditional route, but rather really focusing on robust referral sources that generated an active pipeline of new clients for her and her team. The other thing that stands out is Christi is so committed to creating value. She actually measures, and it really forces her team to measure their time that they spend on everything, not because they want to bill by the hour, not because they're measuring time from that perspective, but rather Christi wants to have a really strong handle on capacity and the complexity of the work that they do so that she can very much understand what it's going to take for her business to create the kind of value she wants for her clients. When Christi is not working, she is a lover of any kind of challenge that can turn something on its head. She loves creative thinking and strategic moves that get her all lit up. And in her spare time, you might find her fly fishing with her husband, Wes, and her dog, Gabby. And on a quiet day, you might find her cuddled up with a book. Christi, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I am also looking forward to this conversation.
Amazing. I'm so excited about it. So, the unexpected leap, I'm curious about that. You took an unexpected leap. I'd love for you to share for us when you were in traditional financial planning, and then after 10 years of building your career there, you took an unexpected leap in your language. Can you share a little bit about that? What happened?
Yes. So I did grow up, as they say, in
Yeah.
traditional financial services, and was fortunate enough to have had a client in the 2008, 9, uh, just traditional client for financial services, but they owned a little business in Austin, Texas at that point. And she called one day and said, Christy, Chase just pulled my loan and I can't make payroll and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, I can't personally help with this situation. However, we know several local banks. We have connections. Let me just
Mhm.
make some introductions, make some connections for you
Mhm.
and and see what happens. And so she is a serial entrepreneur. She,
Yeah.
kind of knows how the game was played. And so we made some connections and I take zero credit for her and her CFO getting out of that
Mhm.
situation, but they did.
Mhm.
And that started the, hey, can you? Hey, how do I? Hey, can you take care of? Question Q&A sessions over the next few years. And so I attribute, quite frankly, a lot of this. Everyone says, how do you get started? And I said, well, I fell into it. And that's really the truth. Because as she started asking questions, her business continued to grow. And as the business continued to grow and she started taking private equity money out of the business,
Mhm.
um, she was an incredible businesswoman. She had a wonderful team, and we none of us do it alone. So,
Mhm.
her and her team built this wonderful business. And as she started taking funding out, taking cash off the table, the questions just kept coming. And I was in a position. My philosophy is how hard can it be? I can figure that out. And so,
Love that.
while that sometimes gets me in trouble a little
Hmm.
bit, it's also it's also really led me to where I'm at now and some of the services that we do for our families that I never would have necessarily have said, "Oh, absolutely. We've done that a million times. We got it." It was,
Right.
you know what? Let's
Yeah.
figure it out. And so
Amazing. Can I ask
Yeah,
a
so
question about that?
of course.
I'm curious about, you talked about the connections. So the connections led you to being able to deliver a different level of service or a different type of service for this client. And they were leaning into that, obviously.
Yeah.
And also were you, right? You were leaning into that
Yes.
ability. So what was it about those questions? Because not very often those types of questions are not something someone in traditional financial services would want to be addressing, right?
Of
What was it
course.
about those questions that stimulated you?
I think they were different. I
Mm,
mean, at that point, we were talking about, we were buying what we would call heavy jet. We were buying very large body aircraft for her and her family to be able to travel on and use for the business. We were talking about buying real estate,
mm,
in various places across the country. So we were talking about things that and she was asking me to handle things that were definitely outside of the scope of of traditional financial investments or as a
right.
financial advisor. And so, but those are the things, after you've been in something for so long, you either like really gravitate towards it or for me, I was
Mm,
like, I've done this for so long. I've been in the investment world for so long. This is really these are different questions that I haven't been in a position to be able to tackle for
hmm
somebody. And so I think it was using a different part of my brain to go and
hmm
solve problems because ultimately at my core, that's who I am. I am a problem solver. I'm a plate spinner. Like that's what I really, really love. And I guess, looking back, I don't know that I realized it at the time, but I think there was a part of me that was maybe bored is not the right word, but
mm,
it was kind of the same thing. We managed the investments, we managed cash flow, and um this was something different. And we did get to the point that I had a wonderful compliance officer at the time, and she understood that
yeah.
I knew where the line was. I had my 910. I had been a compliance officer.
Yeah,
I knew what I wasn't
right.
supposed to do
hmm
inside the compliance
You're
box.
right.
And that was fine for several years, but there became a point at which not only could I see where this family was going and that the needs were coming
Yeah,
fast and furious at that point, and I really was going into I don't think this is going to be okay. I don't
right.
think this is what I should be doing in this compliance box.
This is
But
can I just capture something there? This is such
yes,
an interesting moment. Thank you. Because what you're sharing is that a couple of things were happening. First, you were leaning into, I'm just hearing so much enthusiasm and excitement around the strategic stimulation of those questions that was beyond the scope of what you had been doing in the past. And it was really igniting. Um, I'm hearing a curiosity in you and also a stimulation that was passionate. So that's the first thing I heard. But the second thing I heard was this you were bumping up against the limitations of compliance and regulations.
indeed.
And so there was a sense that I can't continue on this path anymore, right? I
That's
can't
right.
continue this way anymore. Something's got to be different in order for me to create the kind of value I want for my client and for me to be as valuable and to embrace my own gifts and stimulation, right? So there was something there that happened.
I realized I really loved the work. I
Yeah.
loved having the freedom to figure out how to make something happen whenever she said, "Hey,
Mm,
can you figure out?" Yeah.
yeah.
How hard can it be? I can do that. There became a point that I couldn't do it
Right.
inside that regulatory box.
Right.
Not and feel good about it, quite
Right.
frankly.
hmm
Um, and continue on. And so that was the point in time at which I made the decision to transition my practice and I opened the doors to White River and have not looked back since. So
Amazing. So, what was it as you were opening the doors to White River? Um, what was your vision of White River back then? And how has it changed to what it is today?
yeah, gosh. Such a good question. So, whenever I started, I felt very strongly that this was going to be a very boutique, um, that it would be a very boutique, family office, kind of a multi-family office. But I knew there were some core things from the beginning that I knew I didn't want to let go of.
Mm,
And one of those was um, that I didn't want to manage investments for a family. Certainly not because I don't have the experience or what, isn't weren't capable of it, but I always felt like in those years that I was with this family doing this work and still had my investment practice, they were still investment clients as well. And
right.
so when we were making decisions about should we do a loan for the aircraft? Should we do are we doing the line of credit for the new house in Montana? Are we, how are we moving? How are we doing cash flow? That was such a big part of what needed to happen and what needs to happen for a family. But there was always, I don't know if she ever questioned
Mm,
my we should do the SBL, we should pay cash. You know, I don't know that she ever questioned it, but in
hmm.
the back of my mind, there was always am I really choosing what's best for the client?
Right.
Because
Hmm.
when money's moving, that's
Hmm.
impacting the investments. And
Hmm.
so from the
And how
very
you're
beginning,
compensated,
that's right.
right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Because also under that model, there
Hmm.
wasn't a way to charge for the value that we were providing,
Right.
that I was providing underneath this family office services category.
Hmm.
It was all assets under management. And so it just always felt like a conflict of interest, even though I know that I truly felt like I helped make the right decisions for them as we went through those
Absolutely.
questions. It's always there. It's
Yeah,
always just
agreed.
always there.
There's a lot of wisdom there. I agree with you, where just being aware that even though we're doing our ultimate best to not have conflict and to truly work in the best interest, we still have subconscious or biases that are under the surface, even though we're
Absolutely.
trying so hard. It's
Yes.
hard to get away from that. So just having that awareness is key, but hearing how important that boundary was to create that clean division so that the
Hmm.
conflict was removed, I can hear that that was a really important piece for you in this equation.
It was very important. In fact, it was one of kind of those key critical foundation values
Mm-hmm.
that while other things have changed around it over the last however many
Mm,
years, that hasn't. There
mm-hmm.
are a few foundational touch points that have not changed. And
Right.
so around that, when I started I thought we were going to be a small boutique family office services company. I was still kind of learning what that actually meant
Yeah.
because the family office world is it's still a little young, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Mm-hmm.
It has been around for a long time, but we're just now starting to see even within the last couple of years, definitions put
Yeah.
around, what is a family office? Specifically because if the old adage is if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. And while there's a lot of truth to that, there are the services inside of that,
Mm-hmm.
even those didn't have definitions. If you asked, four family offices in an MFO, what does bill pay look like for you? You would get six different answers.
Right.
And that was really challenging in
Mm-hmm.
starting a business and there not really being any um, here's what it is.
Right.
And so I started with the thought that we would be very boutique. We would just handle a couple of families. It would remain small, mostly just me and myself and maybe one other person. And today, um, for a lot of reasons, one of which because of the way that the industry is now, because we are younger, quote unquote, in how we define how people talk about family office, how they
Mm,
understand how family offices work. I actually, I sort of went into this point of if people don't understand what I do, how in the world can I possibly grow? Because they don't understand. How do you market when nobody really understands, A, that there is a market,
Right.
or that these services are even available? And so I added on the education. So I am big on
Hmm.
educating. If you are interested in what family office services is or how to do it, I've made a lot of mistakes already in my career doing this. Let me help you skip that. Let me
Yeah,
help you put
beautiful.
these things into place.
You're
And so what started as very boutique, we're now heavily into education, leading the family office world,
mhm.
specifically on the administrative side. There are
Hmm.
people doing incredible work on the philanthropy and psychology and a lot of disciplines inside a family office. So we tend to focus on the admin side,
Yeah.
um, but there's no
Inter
one else doing it, and
Right.
so
And talk about trailblazing. Not only did you go into a relatively undefined business to start with, given family office, as you
yeah.
said, you ask four people and you get six different answers about what it means. Um, you also entered the administrative side, which was essentially unserved. And so what I'm hearing is that you have been creating the standard as you go.
Yes, yes. That has been the whole goal these last couple of years is literally creating the standards by which we
Yeah.
can all play. Because if we can all get better, family
Yeah.
services get better. Families
Right.
are the ultimate beneficiaries when we all figure out how to be better in our
Hmm.
roles.
Hmm. What is it about this particular angle, the administrative services, that is so important to you?
So I think I gravitate towards the administrative side for mostly. This is funny. I never thought I never set out to build a bookkeeping firm. I assure you. That was
I can
farthest
hear
from my
that.
that was the farthest from my
Oh.
desire. However,
Mm,
what I discovered, and maybe just had an epiphany one day, oh yeah, this is what this means. If you don't have a solid foundation for a family, or if a family doesn't have a solid foundation, it is very difficult for them to then be able to go and make those higher level decisions, because they don't have the data that they need to really
mm,
understand what that decision means long term. And so the the reason that we focus so heavily on those administrative tasks, the bill pay, the bookkeeping, document management. We built a
mhm,
lot of databases for families. Those are the that is the foundation for a family. It is those things that you can constantly come back to. So now when a family is talking to their investment advisor, or they're talking to a third party about doing a new real estate deal or a new acquisition
mhm,
or alternative, something like that, or starting a new business, they can now come into us and say, we think this is what it's going to take. Do we have the cash flow to do that?
right.
Can we afford to buy this new property? Can we, what does this look like? Do we have enough income coming in to
Mm,
cover the capital commitments that we've already made? If you don't have that strong, detailed foundation on the bookkeeping side, you can't answer those questions.
mhm,
It's not as easy as just calling your investment advisor saying, "Hey, can you tell me how much income I have coming in this month or this
right.
quarter or this year?" They can get you close, but they don't have everything and they don't know what you're spending. And so, it's always been interesting to me that it doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have, kind of works on both spectrums. If you don't understand what your cash flow is, it is very easy for a family with seemingly unendless resources to have a cash flow crunch, because suddenly, they got into an investment and it had capital calls of,
Right.
you know, 30, 50 million, which at the time they were like, oh, no problem, I have it. Well,
Right.
maybe you do have it, but if you don't have it at the right time, when those capital calls happen to start coming in, that's a problem, because now you're in a position to have to do something
Hmm.
that you might not have done had there been a plan for it. So those are the things I love that we can be and build that foundation for a family and
Right.
really set them up for good conversations within the family. We can set them
Mm,
up for helping them make good decisions on helping them make informed decisions on do I keep this property? Do I sell this property? Are we here often enough compared to the
mhm.
costs? Those kinds of things. Um, I find it fascinating. I like the growth side, but I love the idea that we can really push a family forward and help keep them on track for generations just by being good stewards of that foundation and that information.
I can hear that. Your
Yeah.
your tone changed there. As you started, especially when you started vocalizing or even imaging in your head this idea of generations and stewardship. I heard that. What is it about that that touched you?
The idea you hear so often that a family makes their money and within a few generations the money is gone.
Mm,
And the adage is shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Now, that has been proven as somewhat not entirely correct. However, the idea is fair because, grandma and grandpa made this money and they worked hard and maybe they were immigrants and they built this business and their kids saw how hard they worked. And yes,
mhm.
they enjoyed the fruits of that labor later on in life, but they still remembered the,
Right.
the hard work that it took. And then maybe the next generation, their mom and dad got their kids excited about being in the business and they worked hard. And then their kids only knew money. They didn't know any
Right.
different. And because, that kind of that third generation, they didn't necessarily see the struggle that grandma and
Mm,
grandpa had. You lose some of that context. And so I think that's a hard one to watch play out continuously over
agreed.
time.
Yeah.
But if a family has the foundation in place, they have so much better of an opportunity to not let that happen because they're having conversations. But more than that, I like to say some of our favorite clients actually are families who they've just sold their business or they're really just starting to make their money. And the reason I love them so much is because we can build a foundation for them as they're growing, which means we
Mm,
can put good processes in place on their documentation. Suddenly, we haven't lost why those trusts were created. We
right.
haven't lost why did the family make that investment, and
Mm,
we still have the documents. When we made
mhm.
that investment, I can't tell you how many times I've said, "Oh, do we have those? Do we have that paperwork?" No, no. And so now we're going back and recreating.
Right.
And if a deal blows up on the bad side, you need those documents because that's what tells you what your
Mm,
recourse is. If you
mhm.
don't have them, you're a little bit stuck. And so if we can get in with families and help them build that, they will never know. And it's perfectly wonderful that they will never know just how well they can be set up from the beginning
Right.
and be the I like to call it the in-between of the cocktail advisors. So a cocktail advisor for us is a family as just took a new had a new windfall, sold their business. It's very public that they've just come into money of however much it is, and suddenly everybody comes out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Everybody has a deal. I got a guy.
Hmm.
My brother-in-law is doing something. It's going to be great. It's going to be the next big thing you should invest.
Yeah.
When the reality is those probably aren't the best things to invest
Right.
in, but they don't know.
Right.
And so if you can be that person between them and the outside world,
Mm,
not to cut everything off,
hmm.
but to be a filter and say, you know what? That that does sound like a cool idea. It's just a
Mm,
little too early for us, I think.
mm,
Maybe come back to us in a year or when you hit these metrics, and then let's talk about doing an investment then. You'd be surprised how many
hmm.
um, after that don't come
Yeah.
back.
Well, a voice, in a sense, that voice of reason is, a little bit of that. You're just offering them an opportunity to pause and
Right.
realign with what's important to them and realign with their bigger objectives and their goals, right? That's
That's
what I'm
right.
hearing.
Absolutely.
What I'm hearing from you is that there's a couple of themes. There's a sense of protection, like you're really
Mhm.
protecting what they've built and giving it space to grow into the future. And I'm also hearing that there's something very important for you around this the future generations and the stewardship, the healthy stewardship of that wealth. What is it that it inspires you or and lights you up around that? I hear it's in the future stewardship. What is it about that, Christi, that's capturing you?
I think that I we didn't my family we did not grow up with money. In fact, we grew up what most people would put on the lower middle class. Might be stretching it a little bit, but um, I having been around wealth as an adult and seeing friends grow up in it
Mm,
and not having a real connection to not only their family, why they now have why they were um, why they are now in that wealth, but how their family got to that place
mm,
is a little bit heartbreaking, quite frankly. And so we have friends who have grown up in that space and with everything they could want. And in fairness to them, they're lovely people. They just don't have a connection to it. They don't really understand it. Some of them are even a little resentful of it
mm,
because they wanted to make their own way in the world.
mhm,
And
mm,
and I'm like, I respect that, but also, you know, having come from the other side, surely you can see
mhm,
the advantage. And so, just being able to see how we have had some friends who have struggled, and seeing some of these other families whose kids they don't always have a great relationship with their parents. They don't understand
mm,
why why was it so important when grandma and grandpa set this up to 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 continue it on and how hard they worked and what they sacrificed for it. So much of that gets lost over time. And the reality is money is an interesting thing. It can certainly bring you together. You can do wonderful things with it. You can create opportunities for yourself. You can also create opportunities for other people and for other
mhm,
businesses.
mm,
So it's a wonderful tool, but at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's not the end all be all. And when a family loses sight of that, or it's not that intention is not as carefully curated for future generations, what's it worth if you don't have a relationship with your family? What's it really worth at the end of the day? Um, and I think that's also where you start to see the future generations losing touch and spending unwisely because they're not really attached to the values, not the money, but attached to the values like their
mhm,
like their parents and other generations were. So I think it's just a way to continue. If your family has built this wonderful tool and given you this wonderful toolbox to use, how can
mm,
other practitioners help you understand what your tools in your toolbox are, because
mm,
that's not easy. And then how do you use them in a way that is meaningful to you as a, third or fourth generation? And then how do you continue it on to really make that initial sacrifice that was
mhm.
made? How do you really honor that into the future?
Yeah, I'm hearing that there's something very important for you, that there's connection and meaningful connection. You talked about family backstory, you talked about sacrifices that past generations have made.
Yeah.
You talked about the importance of even just honoring that story, the backstory, and we all have one,
We do.
honoring our backstory, whatever it is, recognizing the tools in our toolbox and seeing their possibility.
Mhm.
Is that what I'm
Most
hearing from
definitely.
you?
Most definitely.
In
Yeah.
this, and then it ultimately, um, what's really standing out for me in this conversation is your joy and also your values around connections, whether it's family connections or professional connections, but those relationships, those healthy relationships where people feel themselves honored, respected, and valued, but they're also giving the same to others. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Most definitely. I mean, I firmly believe what we were my husband and I both went to Texas A&M and in College Station, and the saying was always, it's the hands you shake and the friends you make.
Mm,
That's how you move through life. And for whatever reason, I really took that to heart. And it has proven to be true for me personally, because it is the people that I meet. Some people come in and out of your life and they're there to teach you a lesson or show you something new, but they're only there for a short time.
mhm,
And others really, they have real sticking power. And they're part of your lives for a long time. And those are the so and I think you get something out of every one of those
mhm.
relationships and every one of those connections if you're really attuned to it.
Yeah.
And you really want to understand why was that person in my life and why did they cause me so much pain? There was probably a lesson there for
There's
you.
probably a lesson in there, more than
Probably a
likely,
lesson.
yes. Well, you know what? There's always a lesson. It's whether or not you choose to find it or
That's
honor
right.
it,
That's
right?
right.
Oh,
That's exactly
yeah, this
right.
is lovely. Just really leaning into this idea of the backstory, because as we've been reflecting in this conversation about your own backstory and how that's translated into where you sit today, you've spent a lot of time with your own clients and their backstory as you're building that foundation. One of the things, as you know, in my work, what I do is help people with differentiating their services, particularly understanding the backstory and how it serves their story today and how they can create value going forward around that integrity. There's a lot in that around differentiation. One of the
Definitely.
things, you talked about at the very beginning again was this, you were setting the standard in an industry that was really undefined. When you were creating that offer and in your
Hmm.
mind's eye and feeling that you were unique and alone, which is a common thing when you're differentiating or trailblazing as you've been doing.
Yeah.
How did you continue to keep yourself courageous and focused on that as you were feeling alone in this brand new world, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I that's I will tell you that definitely the early days were pretty lonely.
Mm,
And even still today, but in the early days, I recognize that even though we might not have the same um definitions of what, we agreed a family office service was or how it should work, I still knew that there was something there, and that I needed to get plugged in to
mm,
other communities so I could, whether I chose to go down that path or agree with that definition, I needed to figure out
mm.
what everybody else was thinking, so then I could make the decision, is that something that I believe serves my families the best?
Gorgeous.
Or do I think it needs to be tweaked a little bit um, to give them my best? And so there were definitely a lot of lonely days in the beginning, because I had more people telling me that this wouldn't work, that there was no way that I could build a family office services company without managing the investments because
Right.
investments is what paid for family office
Right.
services. And I just didn't think that was true. I wasn't exactly sure how to prove it wasn't going to be true, but I just didn't feel like it was true. And
Yeah.
so, so it was, I tried to make as many friends as I could and learn from other groups. Anybody who would talk to me, I was thrilled to have a conversation with them.
Mm.
And so I tried to reach out to as many as I could. And ultimately, I found Family Wealth Alliance. Found the Family Office Exchange and a couple of other smaller groups. Again, this is an industry that is very private. And
Yeah.
so to you're not just going to do a Google search and show me single family offices that I can network or family office networking opportunities in my
Hmm.
area. Those searches just don't exist even to today. And so it does take some work to get into to start finding a tribe of people
Right.
um,
Hmm.
that you can really learn from and have conversations that are strength building and character building in a way that pushes you forward. And so I focused a lot, and quite frankly, I still do, on building those communities to have those conversations because what I've also learned about myself over the last several years is I am an entrepreneur at heart. I love
What makes
creating.
you say that? What makes you say that you're an entrepreneur at heart?
I my sweet team. I love
Aw.
you so much, team. Um, Bless their hearts.
Aw.
They take I'm like I have an idea. What if we did this, this, and this for a family, and then we summed it up here and we like tied it all together here, and here's the big bow. And that happens pretty regular. And bless them, they say, okay, okay, I think, yeah, we see where you're going. We don't know how you're going to get there, but we see it and
Mm,
we'll figure it out. And so
mm,
I love that creativity and how can we always how can we always push forward and get better?
mhm.
And my team just, boy, they are troopers. They just go right along
They're
with
right
me.
in there with
So
you. We'll
they're
figure it
in it.
out.
They're in it to
Um,
win it.
has there been a time in your journey with White River where there was a challenge that caused you some significant learning?
Oh yes, yes. I will tell you the one that sticks out the comes to mind the quickest. I It's been a couple of years now. We Because we are word of mouth, we are referral only. Um, Most of the families that come to us, they're coming from other families or they're coming from advisors or other
Hmm.
practitioners who know us,
Hmm.
who know me. And they know kind of my style and so typically the families that are getting referred to us, we already kind of have a little bit of a connection simply because of who referred them to us and who knows me. This one in particular was referred to us from someone who didn't really know me. It was a casual acquaintance. They knew what White River did, and this family said, "Hey, I need these services," and they said, "Oh, well, here, try. Here's three groups. Try out White River." And up until that point, I had taken a little bit for granted that I didn't have a
Mm.
thorough onboarding or thorough family vetting
Ah.
question process. And this family in particular was in need. I could see that. I could understand why they were a little bit frustrated in their current situation. And I
Hmm.
knew that that was something that we just by how we do what we do, that was something that was not going to be an issue. Um, and they hired us the next day, which should have been my first red flag. Um,
Mm.
but it wasn't. And so they hired us and we started the onboarding process, which we do have. It was just the pre, are we
Hmm.
going to be a good fit for you? Are you
The
going to be a good fit for
qualifying
us?
process.
The qualifying process, exactly. And
Hmm.
so, fast forward, that family, that family broke us, and we talk about that often internally. And it's not their fault.
Mm,
This was, that this was on me for not having a good qualifying process at the time.
mm,
Um, it was also on me for not doing a better job setting and holding expectations on timelines and things like
mm,
that. So I certainly take these
mhm,
lessons very, very seriously and
mhm,
to heart. Um, but that family broke us internally because we were trying so hard to get them to a place that we knew that we could get them to, but they needed it quicker because there were all of these other things. They were trying to do a prenup done. They were trying to do a lot of multiple things all at one time, which these kinds of families typically do. I mean, it's
right.
not, you don't usually get trickles. You kind of come in and like,
They're
here's the
ready.
ready, like, let's go, let's do this. Even after you've been with them
Oh,
for years, they're like,
yeah.
and now we're going to do all the things we've been talking about, and we need them all done in the next couple of months. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. We just didn't have the processes and the procedures set up. We were using systems that ultimately took too long to
Mm,
build out. They were
right.
fine when we're building out over time. They were too slow
Mm,
for building out in quick fashion. And so we have done a lot of reflection on that whole entire process with that family. And as a consequence, as a result, we have rebuilt, I would say 90% of our internal processes. We've updated some of our
mm,
softwares. We've changed how we communicate internally about project management. So looking back, it was a fantastic opportunity for
mm,
us to really push forward and see where
right.
things break, to really stress test the business and the processes and procedures. But man, going through it
I can
it
hear
was
that.
rough.
Well, you
Yeah.
used very powerful language, and where a toxic client, for lack of better language, can break you internally.
Yeah.
Just the mismatch of clients and where they're not aligned is so powerful. So,
Yeah.
can you think of a story on the opposite end? Can you think of a story or a time, particular situation where your learning has been phenomenal and the growth was exceptional as a result of something positive?
Positive. Yes. So another family, an older family, they didn't want their children to have to be the ones to step in and pay the bills and take care of them and do all of the things that we do. They didn't want their kids to
Right.
have to do that. And so
Mm,
they brought us on board. Um, they pro Probably this is why this family comes to my mind so quickly, is because they are so kind.
oh,
And he made his money from scratch basically, and as a result really appreciates someone who's
mm,
willing to put in the effort to how can we help you? I see you doing this. What
mm,
can we handle this for you? We're happy to. We'll take care of this. Let me take this off of your plate. And so um there are a couple of learning things that we've gotten to do for this family specifically. We've built a new house for them. And it has been a joyful process because, we've stuck to our budgets, we've stuck to timelines, we've had to have hard conversations, but they've come at it with such a grace
mm,
that whenever we've been able to, or whenever we've needed to have conversations, both with the family and with the contractors, it's been from a place of, okay, we're going here. Um, this is what I'm thinking. Do you think it can work that way? And so there's
mm,
been a give and take, and there's been a growth together.
Right.
where we've all come to the table and someone has said, I don't know. I see a fly in that ointment, but what if? And then we stand back and say, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Let's implement that. And you know what? That makes total sense to me because now I can take that and I can replicate it over here. And
Hmm.
so there have been a number of times with this family where our communication processes have gotten better because we've been able to have dialogue and
Right.
constructive communication with all of the advisors sitting at the table of, if I'd known that, I would have made a different decision. Got it. Tell you what, let's change how we are disseminating this information on this timeline. If we make
Yeah.
this little tweak right here, does that change how things would have gone down? Yes, yes,
Mm.
it does. Great, done.
Yeah.
Move forward. We just made it better. We're
Right.
always looking for those tweaks
Right.
to increase.
You're getting better together, right?
We're getting better
That's what I'm
together, and
hearing.
that's
Yeah,
yes,
you're getting better
yes,
together, and there's a collaborative of mutual respect. I also heard kindness, grace, joy,
yes,
appreciation, gratitude.
most
Is,
definitely.
yeah, I'm hearing.
Yeah, I will tell you that is when I sat down to really consider what happened with that other family
Mhm.
and how I don't let that happen again.
Mm,
And by that way, that family is no longer with us.
I imagined.
Yeah. Um, which hurts,
Mhm.
it's that hurts. However, that was absolutely the right decision. But I realize we have an opportunity to be real partners with families and to do really amazing work and help them do the amazing work that they want to do, whatever that is. And I want to do that with people who are kind and who are appreciative. And yeah, they challenge us because otherwise, how do you get better? If no one
Right.
challenges you or, makes you stop and think about it in a different way, how do you get better? But there is a difference in that constructive communication and having the ability to get better
Right.
versus the
Yep,
alternative.
exactly.
So,
Amazing.
yeah,
Which takes us to the next phase of your growth. I'm aware that you have a goal, a giving goal
we
through
do.
White River. Would you
Yes.
like to just take a moment to share that with us? Very inspiring.
Yes. So this has increased over the years, and I hope that it continues to increase. But we have a giving goal for 2020, actually for 2025 now, of $500,000 back to the communities that we live and work in and give our time and talents and treasures to. So this year, I hope that the plan is that White River donates 500,000 back to these communities that we are in, and then
Fantastic.
every year we're just increasing it from there, is the goal. So
That's beautiful. And what is it about that specific giving initiative that is so important to you, Christy?
I think if you are lucky enough and blessed enough um, to be in the position of having a business that is growing and you have the ability to do good for others, I just firmly believe that you sh that's just part of how the world goes
Mm,
around. And so most of our philanthropic donations go to services that are promoting financial planning for the underserved community to help
mm,
them figure out how to get on their feet and stay on their feet when there's not a lot of income coming in.
mhm.
So we do a lot of work around financial planning, and then children's services. So,
Beautiful. Oh,
yeah,
amazing. Well, we can hear that thread is a consistent for you around building that protection, stability, and opening up possibility in the future by making sure that that foundation is really, really strong.
most
Heard
definitely.
that throughout over and over again. Okay, so I have one last question. Fly fishing. Tell me about fly fishing. Why fly fishing?
I gotta tell you, my husband gets me into a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have tried
Um,
otherwise. And fly fishing is one of them because he loves to. I've always enjoyed fishing, but he really loves to fly fish. And I was like, well,
mm.
all right, let's try this. How hard can it be? Well, turns out it's not super easy, but my goodness, it's we are fortunate enough to have a little place up in Colorado near the Dream Stream,
Mm.
and we travel in the summertime in our RV. And so we tend to stick to the mountains and the rivers and like the Madison and the Blackfoot, and we love it so much. And so we pick places that we can stand in beautiful rivers and fly fish as we make our way across the states. And it has just been such a joy to take that time because you're there, you're just there, and it really centers me and quiets me
Mm.
in a way that I didn't know that it would whenever I was like, well, I want to go.
Yeah,
How hard can it be? So,
exactly. There you go. I'll
yeah,
figure it out.
I'll figure it out.
As you
The
have
lessons.
done. There you
Yes.
go. Oh,
Yes.
amazing. We started out with I'll figure it out and we ended with I'll figure it out.
I'll
So
figure it
beautifully
out.
done. We've been through a backstory. We've been through the importance of belief and faith. We've talked about the importance of aligning with values, not just in conflicts of interest, but also in client relationships and personal and family relationships. We've talked about vetting the process of understanding where there's alignment and where things can go sideways if not, and also how wonderful and positive it can be when it is. Talked about
Absolutely.
trailblazing and creating new standards. Christi, been just such a delight. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
I have as well. Thank you.
Amazing. It's my pleasure. Now, before we let you go, where will people be able to find you should they want to get in touch?
You can find us on our website, whiteriverconsultants.com, or find me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. We will look forward to that. And again, thanks for being here. Thank you for being a guest on our Success Differently podcast.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Bye for now.